Joe Biden is going and clinging for dear life because Hollywood superstar George Clooney, a huge Democrat fundraiser, is now dumped spectacularly on the US president in an article in the New York Times. It's told him to quit. And Clooney's star power makes this devastating. But let's not give Clooney applause for his honesty here. The opposite, in fact. Clooney has instead just given us more proof of how Democrats and their key supporters, they've been covering up the president's obvious mental decline for years, until the whole world saw Biden's disastrous performance in last week's debate, and it couldn't be denied anymore. Clooney now writes, well, last month I co-hosted the single largest fundraiser supporting any Democratic candidate ever for President Biden's re-election. It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big Effing Deal Biden of 2010. It wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. Now, Clooney says Biden can't win against Donald Trump, and every Democrat politician he's privately talked to has agreed. But here's the thing about Clooney. He says at this fundraiser he co-hosted actually 3.5 weeks ago, he could see Biden's decline. And indeed, it was so obvious. I mean, Biden froze at the end of the event. He looked totally lost, had to actually be towed like a child off the stage by former President Barack Obama, who was there to help him. Now, Clooney saw all that and said nothing. Not for 3 weeks did he say, oh, hey, actually, Biden's not fit to serve. He said nothing, while the White House spread lies saying that video you just saw of Biden freezing was, oh, it's just a cheap fake, misleadingly edited. And Clooney's only saying this now, 3.5 weeks later, when everyone's seeing for themselves the truth. Biden, again, seizing up, frail, often confused. Now, if we hadn't seen that, Clooney would have said nothing. He had just helped to raise 40 million Australian dollars to re-elect a president who actually seems half dead, incompetent, and Clooney knew it. Joining me from Washington is Sky News US correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise Nielsen, thank you so much for your time. Normally you wouldn't, I think in most countries, ask, whether an actor having an opinion about politics makes any difference at all. But in America, it's very different. How decisive is George Clooney's intervention?
Well, in America, and especially within the Democrats, they rely a lot on celebrity endorsements. That's always a huge factor when it comes to election time, having them all say very positive things. So George Clooney's intervention here is really stark, and it is for a few reasons. He's known to be a big donor within the Democrats. He's a big fundraiser by coordinating other big stars. As we saw with the fundraiser with Joe Biden just a few weeks ago, he really helped put Barack Obama on the map back when he was a junior senator and aspiring to greater things. So the fact that George Clooney's weighed in when he's so close to the Obamas, when he is so close to the Democrat elite, shows that they are at panic stations now. As much as Joe Biden wants to say everyone can move on, the piece he wrote in the New York Times is really just as blunt as they probably needed to hear.
Yeah, I know, and it wasn't even a toss-away remark, just something he said in an interview. It was a well-crafted, long opinion piece in the New York Times, which is the Bible of the left, speaking to leftists, that it was all over for their favourite guy. Yeah, but why didn't he say this 3 weeks ago when he saw Joe Biden having to be towed off the stage by President Obama, the former President Obama? Why wait until the whole world can see what he saw then?
Well, funnily enough, you're actually saying something similar to what the DNC, the campaign, said for Biden. They were briefing out to journalists, oh, George Clooney had to leave earlier, but Joe Biden stayed later, so he couldn't possibly be aware of how good Joe Biden was. But I think we're all asking questions about why all these people within the inner circle have had such a come to Jesus moment after the debate, when we've seen so many symptoms of this kind of decline, especially within the last year. But I mean, anyone who's been watching Joe Biden's career for a long time has seen that this hasn't been a new development. This has been something that's been happening in plain sight for quite some time. And I think everyone was willing to forgive this until we started seeing that this was going to be another election, another campaign. And this should have been a much more open conversation from the get-go. But he's been locked down by his campaign team. He does the least media of any modern day president. I say this ad nauseum, but it's true. It's been true since the first year of his presidency. And this is how they've controlled the narrative. Even his biographers come out and said that he wasn't granted an interview with the president. He was allowed access to the White House and the people around him, but we weren't seeing him one-on-one, face-to-face. And that is what's been covered up in this time. And this is what was impossible to keep up during a presidential election campaign when you've got someone like Donald Trump going around doing the normal campaigning, going to events, going out and pressing the flesh with ordinary voters at little pit stops while he's on his way to and from campaigns. He set the pace and Joe Biden couldn't keep up.